They say hell can wear the mask of heaven, where crystal chandeliers cast shadows instead of light, where marble floors feel colder than winter ice beneath bare feet, where a woman can stand surrounded by luxury and feel nothing but the crushing weight of abandonment. Some prisons have golden bars. Some cages are built from promises that turn to poison. And sometimes the only witness to your destruction is a man they treat like dust. A man whose eyes hold secrets that could reduce their glittering world to ashes. Janelle stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching her husband. Blake Ashford arranged designer luggage in the entrance hall below, each piece probably worth more than her childhood apartment had cost to furnish. Her swollen belly made every breath difficult, and her ankles had disappeared into puffy flesh that no longer resembled her own body. She gripped the railing with both hands and descended one careful step at a time, each movement sending pain shooting up her spine. "Blake, please listen to me," she said when she reached the bottom, her voice barely above a whisper because speaking loudly made her dizzy. "The doctor said the baby could come any day. I'm scared to be alone. Can't you wait just a few more weeks until she's born?" Blake didn't look up from adjusting his reflection in the enormous mirror that dominated the wall. His hair was perfect, his suit tailored to his body like a second skin, and Janelle remembered when she used to think he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Now she looked at him and felt nothing but cold emptiness where love used to live. "We've discussed this already, Janelle. Mother has been planning this vacation since last year. The yacht is booked. The hotels are reserved. I'm not disappointing my entire family because you can't handle being alone for a little while. Women have babies every day. You'll be fine." The casual dismissal of her fear made something crack inside Janelle's chest. "I'm not asking you to cancel. I'm asking you to postpone until after your daughter is born. I'm asking my husband to be here when our child enters the world. Is that really too much?" Blake finally turned to look at her, and the disgust in his eyes made Janelle wish he had kept his back turned. "Look at yourself, Janelle. You've completely let yourself go. You're huge. You shuffle around like an old woman. My mother was right when she said women from your background don't know how to maintain themselves during pregnancy. This is exactly what she warned me would happen." Each word landed like a physical blow. Janelle looked down at her pregnant body, at the evidence of life growing inside her, and felt shame wash over her, even though she knew she should feel pride. "I'm creating a human being inside my body, Blake. Your daughter. Our child. How can you look at me with disgust when I'm carrying your baby?" The front door burst open, and Constance Ashford entered like royalty arriving at court. Her silver hair styled in an elaborate updo that probably required professional help. She wore white from head to toe, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists, and her eyes swept over Janelle with the kind of contempt usually reserved for insects. "Blake, darling, we're already behind schedule. The car to the airport has been waiting for 15 minutes, and you know how I despise tardiness. It sets a terrible tone for the entire trip." Blake's brother Graham appeared behind their mother, smirking in that way that made Janelle's skin crawl. "Wow, she really has gotten massive, hasn't she? I mean, I know pregnancy adds weight, but this is something else entirely. You sure there's only one baby in there, Janelle? Maybe you're having twins and nobody told you." Janelle felt her face burn with humiliation. She had gained exactly the amount of weight her doctor said was healthy, had followed every guideline, had tried desperately to stay attractive for Blake, even as her body transformed in ways she couldn't control. But nothing she did was ever enough for this family, who saw her as an embarrassment rather than a person. Blake's sister Adriana glided through the door next, her perfect figure showcased in clothes that cost more than Janelle used to make in months of working. She wrinkled her nose as her eyes landed on Janelle's swollen form. "You really should have hired a personal trainer months ago, Janelle. Some women manage to look elegant even while pregnant. It's all about discipline and self-control. Maybe after the baby comes, you can work on getting back to something resembling acceptable." The cruelty was so casual, delivered with sweet smiles, that made it somehow worse than if they had simply screamed insults at her. Janelle felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back, because crying in front of Constance only made things worse, only gave the woman more ammunition to use later. Blake grabbed his bags and moved toward the door, without a backward glance. He paused only long enough to pull an envelope from his jacket and toss it onto the entry table. "There's cash in there for groceries and whatever else you need. Don't call me unless the house is literally burning down, Janelle. I mean it. I deserve this vacation without you ruining it with constant complaints about how hard pregnancy is. But what if I go into labor?" Janelle heard herself ask, hating how desperate she sounded, but unable to stop the words. What if something goes wrong? What if I need you? Constance's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Women have been giving birth since the dawn of humanity, dear. It's a perfectly natural process. I'm sure you'll manage just fine. We've arranged for someone to maintain the grounds while we're gone, so you won't be completely alone. Though frankly, some time by yourself might teach you to be less dependent. Motherhood requires strength, and you've shown precious little of that quality since Blake brought you into this family." The words were designed to hurt, and they hit their target with precision. Janelle watched as Blake and his family loaded their expensive luggage into luxury vehicles. Watched as they climbed inside without a single backward glance. Watched as the convoy pulled away down the long driveway, carrying them toward airports and yachts and a world where she simply did not exist. She stood at the window, with one hand pressed against the cold glass and the other cradling her belly, where her daughter was kicking. Tears streamed down her face now because there was no one left to see them, no one left to judge her for the weakness of crying. The mansion stretched around her, enormous and empty and cold, and Janelle felt more alone than she had ever felt in her entire life. "It's okay, baby girl," she whispered to her stomach. "We don't need them. Mama's going to take care of you. I promise. Somehow we'll be okay." But the words felt hollow, even as she spoke them, because she didn't know how to take care of herself right now, much less a newborn baby. How was she supposed to survive labor and delivery alone in this massive house, with no one to call if something went wrong? The fear settled into her chest like ice, spreading through her veins until she felt frozen from the inside out. A movement in her peripheral vision made her turn her head. Jerry Johnson stood in the hallway that led toward the back of the house, partially hidden in shadows, and the expression on his face made her breath catch in her throat. He was the groundskeeper, the man who maintained the estate, the man this family barely acknowledged as human. But the way he was looking at her now held an intensity that seemed completely at odds with his humble position. His eyes held something she couldn't name. Rage, mixed with pain, mixed with determination, that made him look dangerous despite his work clothes and calloused hands. He was watching her like she mattered, like her suffering registered on some fundamental level that Blake and his family had never bothered to access. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," Janelle said, quickly wiping at her tears with trembling hands. "I'm sure you have work to do. Please don't let me keep you." Jerry stepped forward into the light, and Janelle noticed things about him she had never paid attention to before. The way he carried himself with confidence that seemed unusual for his position. The quality of his features, strong and defined in ways that spoke of good genetics. The intelligence in his eyes that suggested depth she had never bothered to explore because he was just the help, just someone who existed in the background. "No one should be treated the way they just treated you," Jerry said. And his voice was low and controlled, but there was steel underneath it that made her shiver. "No one deserves that kind of cruelty, especially not when you're vulnerable and scared and about to bring life into this world." The words unlocked something inside Janelle that she had been holding closed. Suddenly, she was sobbing, really sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of grief and fear and exhaustion that she had been suppressing for months. Jerry moved toward her without asking permission and guided her to the nearby sofa, his hands gentle but sure as he helped her sit. He disappeared for a moment and returned with water and a soft blanket, draping it over her shoulders before positioning a footstool beneath her swollen feet. The simple acts of care made Janelle cry harder because no one had taken care of her like this. In so long she had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Thank you," she managed to whisper between sobs. "I don't even know why you're being nice to me. You barely know me." Jerry looked at her with eyes that held shadows of his own pain, his own losses, his own understanding of what it meant to be treated as less than human by people who should have known better. "Because someone should be kind to you, Janelle, and because I know what it's like to be destroyed by people who see other humans as obstacles rather than souls." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. Janelle wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand the intensity in his eyes and the way he spoke like someone who had survived his own war. But exhaustion crashed over her in a wave that made her entire body feel like it was made of lead. Jerry stood to leave, giving her privacy, but Janelle found herself calling out before he could disappear back into the shadows. "Jerry, will you still be here? Well, they're gone. I know that sounds pathetic, but the thought of being completely alone in this house terrifies me." Something softened in Jerry's expression. "I'll be here, Janelle. I'm not going anywhere. If you need anything, day or night, you just call for me and I'll come. You're not alone anymore." The promise settled over her like a warm blanket. Jerry left, and Janelle sat in the vast living room, listening to the silence that felt less suffocating now that she knew someone in this mansion actually cared whether she lived or died. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered to her daughter about the groundskeeper, who had shown more compassion in 5 minutes than her husband had shown in months. Outside the window, Jerry stood in the garden staring at the roses with an expression that would have frightened Janelle if she had seen it. His hands were clenched into fists, and his jaw was set in lines that spoke of rage barely contained. He had watched the Ashford family destroy this woman's spirit, and something inside him had snapped. Some final barrier between calculated revenge and righteous fury dissolving into nothing. They had no idea who he really was. No idea that the man who mowed their lawn had more wealth than they could imagine, had spent years planning their destruction, had come here with a singular purpose that had nothing to do with gardening and everything to do with making them pay for old sins they had probably forgotten. But Jerry hadn't forgotten, would never forget. And now he had another reason beyond his own grief to make sure the Ashford family faced consequences for their cruelty. He would protect Janelle and her baby, would take care of them in ways her own husband refused to. And when the moment came to reveal the truth, he would make sure Blake Ashford understood exactly what he had thrown away. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Mask. Jerry stood in the garden long after darkness fell, staring at roses that bloomed in shades of red and pink and white. And every flower reminded him of his sister, who had loved gardens more than anything else in the world. Marianne used to say that roses proved something beautiful could exist even with thorns to protect it, that softness and strength weren't opposites, but partners in survival. She had been wrong about that. Softness without strength just got you destroyed. Jerry had learned that lesson when he watched his entire family crumble under the weight of what the Ashford family had done to them. Watched people he loved die one by one until he was the only one left standing in the ruins. The Ashfords had taken everything. Not through honest victory, but through lies and manipulation and using their wealth to corrupt systems that were supposed to protect people like Jerry's family. They had wanted what Jerry's father had built, and they had simply taken it, crushing everyone who stood in their way without a single moment of remorse. Jerry's father had been a proud man who believed hard work and integrity would be enough to protect what he had created. He had been wrong. The day the lawyers came to explain that everything was gone, seized through legal manipulations that should have been criminal but weren't because the Ashfords had bought the right people, Jerry's father had clutched his chest and fallen. His heart had literally broken from the shock and grief of losing everything he had spent his life building. watching his father lie in that hospital bed, eyes open but empty, breathing but not living, had started Jerry's education in the reality of how the world actually worked. His mother had sat beside that bed day after day, holding a hand that would never squeeze back, and Jerry had watched as her own light slowly died. She gave up first, just stopped waking up one morning, her heart finally admitting what her mind had known all along. His father followed within days, as if he had been waiting for permission to let go. And then it was just Jerry and Marianne, two survivors in a world that suddenly felt hostile and cruel and utterly indifferent to their suffering. Marianne had tried to be strong. She had a wedding planned, a future mapped out with a man who claimed to love her. But when the family name became associated with failure and scandal, when being connected to them meant social suicide, her fiancé had walked away without explanation. Just stopped returning her calls, stopped answering her messages, disappeared from her life like she had never existed. Jerry remembered the day Marianne came to him holding her wedding dress, the white fabric that should have meant hope and new beginnings. She had stood in their tiny apartment holding that dress and asked him if he thought anyone would ever love her again, if she was permanently broken by what the Ashfords had done to their family. Jerry had told her yes, someone would love her. Someone would see past the destroyed family name and recognize the beautiful soul beneath. He had believed it when he said it. He had been wrong. Jerry had watched his sister spiral downward, watched as depression consumed her like a slow-acting poison, watched as she smiled less and slept more and stopped talking about the future because she no longer believed she had one. He tried to help her, tried to be enough to keep her tethered to life, but grief is a black hole that swallows everything, including hope. He took her to doctors who prescribed medications that dulled her pain, but also dulled everything else that made her Marianne. He sat with her through nights when she couldn't sleep, listening to her talk about how exhausted she was from just existing, how every breath felt like lifting something impossibly heavy. He found her on what should have been her wedding day. She had gone to their childhood home. The one that had been foreclosed and sold to strangers had somehow gotten inside and filled the bathtub with water. The note she left said simply, "I can't carry this anymore." And Jerry understood because he felt the same weight crushing him every moment of every day. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Jerry had held her body in that tub, the water gone cold, her skin pale as marble, and he had screamed until his voice gave out. Screamed at the Ashfords who would never hear him, screamed at a world that let good people die while cruel ones prospered, screamed at himself for not seeing how close to the edge she had been, for thinking his love would be enough to keep her here. The police came eventually, pulled him away from her body, and Jerry let them because he had nothing left inside to fight with. But where Marianne had chosen to let go, Jerry had chosen to transform his grief into purpose. Holding her cold body, feeling the absolute finality of death, something inside Jerry had turned to ice. The part of him that believed in goodness, that believed people got what they deserved, that believed the world was fundamentally fair, died in that bathroom along with his sister. What emerged was something harder, colder, more focused. Jerry understood with crystal clarity that the Ashford family would never face consequences unless someone made them face consequences. The system was broken, bought and paid for by people exactly like them. Justice wouldn't come from courts or laws or moral righteousness. Justice would have to be personally delivered. At Marianne's funeral, which only Jerry attended because everyone else had abandoned them, he made a vow over her casket. He would become wealthy enough to destroy the people who destroyed her. He would become powerful enough that the Ashford family would understand what it felt like to lose everything. And he would do it from close enough range that they would see him coming, but never recognize him until it was too late. The vow became the only thing that kept him alive when grief tried to pull him under the same dark water that had claimed his sister. So Jerry had rebuilt himself with singular focus. But the rebuilding was harder than he ever imagined. He took jobs no one else wanted, worked brutal hours that left him exhausted but financially stable, lived in his truck to save every possible dollar. Some nights, he would sit in that truck in parking lots, watching other people go home to families, watching them have the lives that had been stolen from him. And the loneliness was so profound, it felt like drowning on dry land. But he would think of Marianne, would remember his father's broken heart and his mother's grief, and the pain would transform into fuel that kept him moving forward. He taught himself everything he could about wealth creation, about investing, about building the kind of fortune that could stand against families like the Ashfords. He spent nights in libraries reading books about people who had risen from nothing, studying their strategies, learning from their mistakes. He made smart choices and lucky bets and ruthless decisions that paid off beyond his wildest expectations. Every dollar he earned went back into creating more dollars, building a fortune through careful calculation and an almost supernatural ability to see opportunities others missed. He made smart choices and lucky bets and ruthless decisions that paid off beyond his wildest expectations. Property investments that multiplied in value, backing entrepreneurs whose visions changed industries, moving money through markets with timing that seemed almost supernatural, but was really just obsessive research and calculated risk-taking. The wealth accumulated faster than Jerry had dared to hope. Within a handful of years, he had recovered everything his family lost. Within a handful more, he had surpassed it. He kept going because the goal was never just to be rich. The goal was to be powerful enough to destroy people who thought their wealth made them untouchable. By the time Jerry felt ready to execute his revenge, he had more money than the Ashford family could imagine. But money alone wasn't enough. Revenge required proximity, required understanding your enemy, required being close enough to document every crime and exploit every weakness. So Jerry had created a false identity, became someone simple and humble, someone the Ashfords would never see as a threat. He fabricated a complete background that would survive any investigation, created references from people who existed only on paper, became Jerry Johnson the groundskeeper with no family and no ambitions beyond honest work. But he had also made another decision, one that went beyond simple revenge. He decided to test them, not just document their crimes, but test whether they possessed a single shred of human decency beneath their wealth. Because Jerry needed to know, needed absolute certainty that he was destroying people who deserved destruction. His sister had believed in the fundamental goodness of people right up until she couldn't believe anymore. And Jerry owed it to her memory to be absolutely sure the Ashfords were beyond redemption. So he hid his identity, not just for revenge, but as a test. Would they show kindness to someone they perceived as beneath them? Would they treat their groundskeeper like a human being when there was nothing to gain from it? Would any of them prove that somewhere underneath the privilege and entitlement, a decent heart still beat? Jerry spent seasons watching and hoping, despite himself, that maybe one of them would prove him wrong, would show compassion that might make him question his path. Getting hired at the Ashford estate had been easy because wealthy people rarely look closely at the help. They had accepted his application without question, had never bothered to look deeply enough to see the cracks in his story. Why would they? He was just there to mow the lawn and fix things when they broke. He didn't matter enough to investigate. For seasons, Jerry had played his role perfectly. He maintained their grounds and listened to their conversations and documented everything they said when they forgot he was in the room. He collected evidence of bribed officials and falsified documents and all the corrupt practices they had used to build their fortune on the broken backs of families like his. But he had also done something else, something he hadn't anticipated. He had tested them, tested whether any of them possessed basic human decency beneath their wealth and status, tested whether they would show kindness to someone they perceived as beneath them, tested whether there was a single good heart in the entire family. They had all failed, every single one of them. They treated Jerry like furniture, talked over him like he didn't exist, never once acknowledged him as a human being worthy of basic respect. They proved through their daily actions that they were exactly what he suspected. People so corrupted by privilege that they had lost the ability to see other humans as anything but tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. And then Blake had brought home Janelle. Jerry had expected her to be like them, just another person drunk on wealth and status. But instead, he had watched Blake court her with false promises, had watched her fall for a version of Blake that didn't really exist, had watched the mask slip the moment the wedding ended, and Blake no longer had to pretend. Watching the Ashford family destroy Janelle slowly over months had complicated Jerry's clean narrative of revenge. She was innocent in all of this, just another victim of their casual cruelty. And watching her suffer while pregnant, watching her try so desperately to earn love from people incapable of giving it, had stirred something in Jerry he thought was long dead. Compassion, protective instinct, the desire to help someone simply because they needed help, not because it served his larger purpose. These were dangerous feelings for someone who had spent years turning himself into a weapon aimed at one specific target. Now the Ashford family was gone and Janelle was alone, and Jerry stood in a garden making a decision that could complicate everything. He would protect her, would take care of her and her baby, would show her the kindness her own family refused to give. Not because it served his revenge, but because someone needed to, because leaving her to suffer alone would make him no better than the monsters he had sworn to destroy. It was a risk. Caring about her meant creating vulnerability in his carefully constructed plan. But Jerry had spent too long being cold and calculating and empty. Taking care of Janelle might be the only thing that kept him human through what was coming next. He looked up at the mansion where lights glowed in windows, where Janelle was probably sitting alone, wondering how her life had become this nightmare. Jerry made himself a promise, standing in that garden surrounded by roses his sister would have loved. He would protect Janelle and her baby through whatever came next. And then he would destroy the Ashford family so completely they would understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything. The two goals weren't mutually exclusive. He would find a way to walk both paths, even if it meant risking the control he had maintained for so long. For his family's memory, he would have his revenge. For Janelle's sake, he would prove that not everyone in her world was cruel. And maybe, in taking care of her, he would remember what it felt like to be someone who built things instead of just destroying them. Chapter 3. The Silent Language of Care. Janelle woke on the fourth morning and knew before opening her eyes that something was different. The smell of real food drifted through her bedroom, the kind of cooking that required thought and skill. And for a moment she wondered if she was dreaming because no one was here to cook for her. She opened her eyes and saw it sitting on the table beside her bed. A breakfast tray arranged with care, scrambled eggs fluffy and perfect, fresh fruit cut into careful pieces, toast with butter already spread, orange juice in a crystal glass. Steam rose from the eggs, telling her this had been prepared moments ago, and the sight made tears start falling before she could stop them. The past few days had been the loneliest of her life. She had forced herself to eat simple sandwiches that tasted like cardboard, had cried herself to sleep every night, had talked to her baby constantly, because the sound of her own voice was the only thing keeping the silence from swallowing her whole. But this was real food, made with thought and attention, and someone had cared enough to bring it to her. Without being asked, Janelle knew who had done it. Jerry, the groundskeeper who was supposed to be nothing, more than hired help, had somehow known she was struggling, and had decided to help without making a big production of his generosity. She picked up the fork with shaking hands and took a bite of eggs, and the taste exploded in her mouth with flavors she had forgotten food could have. She ate every bite, savoring each mouthful, and when the plate was empty, she sat there holding the tray and crying, because this simple act of kindness felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. She had been so alone, so utterly abandoned, and someone had seen her suffering and decided to do something about it. The next morning brought another tray, and the morning after that. Janelle began to understand that Jerry was taking care of her in ways her own husband never had, showing her through actions rather than words that her life had value, that she mattered, that someone in this world cared whether she woke up hungry or fed. She started noticing other changes too. Small things that showed someone was paying attention to her needs in ways no one had, in longer than she could remember. The temperature in the mansion was always comfortable now, warm enough that her aching body could relax, but not so hot she felt suffocated. Lights stayed on in the hallways at night, guiding her path during the constant bathroom trips pregnancy demanded. Fresh flowers appeared in the rooms she used most often, bringing color and life into spaces that had felt dead. Someone had noticed which rooms she spent time in and had decorated them specifically for her comfort. The thoughtfulness of it made her chest ache with emotions she didn't know how to process. And then one afternoon, Janelle climbed the stairs to check on the nursery, moving slowly because every step required negotiation with the body that felt like it belonged to someone else. She pushed open the door, expecting to see the half-finished space she had been slowly preparing, fighting through exhaustion to assemble furniture piece by piece. Instead, she found perfection. The crib had been fully assembled and dressed with soft bedding and shades that made the room glow. The changing table was organized with everything she would need, diapers and wipes arranged with thought. A rocking chair sat by the window positioned to catch morning light. The walls had been painted a gentle yellow that made the whole space feel warm and welcoming. Even small details had been attended to. A mobile hung over the crib. Books sat on a shelf. A lamp cast gentle light perfect for nighttime feedings. Someone had thought of everything, had created a space where her daughter would be welcomed and loved and cared for. Janelle sank to the floor in that nursery and sobbed until she had no tears left. This man who barely knew her had given her something her own husband had never considered providing. Jerry had seen what she needed and had given it without fanfare, without expecting gratitude, without making her feel like she owed him something in return. He had simply cared, and that caring was saving something inside her that had been dying from neglect. That evening, Janelle went looking for Jerry, despite her swollen ankles and aching back. She found him in the garden, where roses bloomed in impossible beauty, their petals perfect in the fading light. He looked up when he heard her approaching, and concern immediately crossed his face. "You shouldn't be walking around so much," Jerry said, standing quickly and moving toward her. "Your body needs rest, Janelle. You're pushing yourself too hard." "I needed to thank you," Janelle said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to keep it steady, "for the breakfast trays in the nursery and everything else you've been doing. I don't understand why you're being so kind to me, but I need you to know that it's the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart." Jerry looked at her with eyes that held depths she couldn't begin to understand. "You don't need to thank me for treating you like a human being. That should be normal, not something extraordinary. The way your husband and his family treated you before they left was wrong. You deserve so much better than that." The words unlocked something inside Janelle, and suddenly she was telling him things she had never told anyone. About her childhood in a tiny apartment where her mother worked herself to exhaustion, but always made time to read bedtime stories. About meeting Blake at a charity event where she was serving drinks to people who looked through her like glass. About how he had courted her with promises of security and partnership and love. "He made me feel special," Janelle said, wiping at tears that wouldn't stop falling, "like I was someone worth treasuring." But everything changed after the wedding. It was like he had been playing a role, and once I was legally bound to him, he didn't have to pretend anymore. His family made it clear from the beginning that I wasn't good enough, that I was some kind of charity case Blake had taken on. And when I got pregnant, everything got so much worse. Jerry listened without interrupting, giving her the gift of his complete attention. Janelle realized this was the first real conversation she had had in months. Blake never listened, never asked questions, never seemed interested in anything about her beyond what she could provide for his image. "Can I ask you something?" Janelle said, the question escaping before she could stop it. "Why do you work as a groundskeeper? I can tell from the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, that you're capable of so much more." Something flashed in Jerry's eyes. Something that looked like pain mixed with secrets. Sometimes the best way to understand people is to watch them from a position where they forget you're human enough to matter. You learn who people really are when they think no one important is watching. The words sent a chill down Janelle's spine because they suggested depths to this man she hadn't begun to explore. But before she could ask what he meant, her back spasmed with pain so severe it stole her breath. She would have fallen if Jerry hadn't caught her, his hands supporting her weight as if she weighed nothing. He guided her back to the house, moving slowly to accommodate her shuffling steps, and Janelle noticed things about him she had never paid attention to before. The way his touch spoke of refinement and care, the way he moved with unconscious grace, the way his voice carried tones of command when he told her she needed to rest more. Jerry settled her on the couch with pillows supporting her back, brought her water without being asked, made her promise to call him if she needed anything during the night. Janelle found herself nodding because the idea of him being close felt like safety in a world that had become dangerous. After he left, Janelle sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about the groundskeeper who spoke like someone educated and moved like someone accustomed to authority. She thought about the way he looked at the mansion sometimes, with intensity that seemed less like admiration and more like studying an opponent. She wondered who Jerry Johnson really was beneath the role he played. But exhaustion dragged her towards sleep before she could pursue the thought. And her last conscious awareness was of feeling safer than she had in months, knowing someone in this mansion actually cared whether she survived. Her daughter kicked inside her belly as if agreeing with that assessment, and Janelle drifted off with one hand on her stomach and the memory of Jerry's kindness warming something inside her chest that had been cold for far too long. Chapter 4. The night thunder roared. The storm announced itself with thunder that shook the mansion's foundation and lightning that turned darkness into daylight for brief, terrifying moments. Janelle woke feeling her daughter moving with unusual intensity inside her, as if the baby could sense the violence outside and was protesting against it. She lay in bed listening to rain hammer against windows like fists demanding entry. And that's when the first contraction hit. It started low in her belly, tightening that spread through her entire abdomen and took her breath away with its intensity. Janelle pressed both hands against her stomach and counted seconds like the doctor had taught her, waiting for it to pass. The contraction lasted longer than she expected. When it finally released, Janelle told herself it was nothing, just her body practicing for the real thing. But deep in her bones, she knew this felt different, sharper and deeper, radiating through her in waves that left her gasping for air. Another contraction came, then another. Janelle looked at the clock and felt fear claw at her throat because they were coming too close together, which meant this was real labor, which meant her baby was coming right now in the middle of a storm that sounded like the world was ending. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and tried to call Blake, pressing his number with fingers that felt clumsy and foreign. The call wouldn't go through. She tried Constance with the same result, tried Graham and Adriana, and reality crashed over her like a wave. They had blocked her. Her own husband had blocked her number while she was carrying his child, which meant she had no way to reach him, no way to tell him their daughter was being born, no way to ask for help even if she was dying. The betrayal cut deeper than the contractions. What kind of man blocks his pregnant wife's phone number? What kind of family abandons someone carrying their blood? Janelle felt something inside her chest crack and bleed because she had known Blake was cruel, but she hadn't imagined he was cruel enough to completely erase her when She might need him most. Another contraction hit, stronger than the last, and Janelle screamed Jerry's name into the storm. She screamed it again and again, her voice raw with terror, and within seconds her bedroom door crashed open, and Jerry stood there with fear written across his face. "It's the baby." Janelle gasped between contractions, her whole body shaking. "Something's wrong, Jerry. This isn't how it's supposed to feel. I need to get to the hospital right now. Please help me." Jerry's face went pale, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "I'm going to get you there, Janelle. I promise. Can you walk?" Janelle tried to stand, but another contraction doubled her over, and she would have collapsed if Jerry hadn't caught her. He lifted her in his arms, like she weighed nothing despite her pregnant bulk, and Janelle wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder as he carried her down the stairs. The rain hit them the moment Jerry opened the front door, soaking them both instantly. He ran to his truck and settled Janelle in the passenger seat, and when he climbed behind the wheel, Janelle saw real fear in his eyes as he looked out at the storm. The driveway had become a river. Trees were down across the road, blocking the usual route. The storm was so violent that visibility was nearly zero, and Janelle's contractions were coming faster now, less than 5 minutes apart, which meant they were running out of time. "Jerry, I'm scared," Janelle heard herself say, her voice breaking into pieces. "What if we don't make it? What if my baby dies because I'm stuck here with no one who cares enough to help me?" Jerry reached over and took her hand, gripping it hard enough that it almost hurt, and when he spoke, his voice carried conviction that cut through her panic like light through darkness. "Listen to me, Janelle. I'm going to get you to that hospital if I have to drive through hell itself to do it. You are not alone anymore. You have me, and I will not let anything happen to you or your baby. Do you understand me? You are not alone. Not ever again." The words cracked something open inside Janelle's chest, some dam that had been holding back too much pain for too long. She squeezed his hand like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth, and Jerry put the truck in gear and drove into the storm with determination that seemed impossible for any human to sustain. The drive became a blur of pain and terror. Jerry navigated flooded roads where water came halfway up the truck doors, and Janelle could feel them hydroplaning, the vehicle losing traction before Jerry wrestled it back under control. Trees had fallen across intersections, forcing them to backtrack and find alternate routes. And twice, Jerry had to get out in the pouring rain to physically move debris, while Janelle screamed through contractions alone in the truck. She lost track of time. Lost track of everything except pain that felt like her body was being torn apart from the inside. Jerry kept talking to her, kept telling her to breathe and focus on his voice and hold on just a little longer. And Janelle clung to his words, like a drowning person clings to anything that might keep them afloat. They hit a curve too fast, and the truck started spinning. The world outside the windows becoming a blur of rain and darkness. Janelle screamed Jerry's name and felt them sliding toward a ditch that would end everything. But Jerry fought the wheel with both hands, and somehow, impossibly, the tires caught and they were moving forward again. "I'm sorry," Jerry said, his voice rough with fear. "I'm so sorry, Janelle." "Just hold on. We're almost there." But they weren't almost there. The hospital was still far away, and Janelle's contractions were coming so close together now that she barely had time to breathe between them. She felt herself starting to fade, felt consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers, and Jerry's hand squeezed hers so hard she gasped. "Stay with me," Jerry commanded, his voice dropping into tones of absolute authority. "Don't you dare leave me now, Janelle. Your daughter needs you. I need you. Stay with me." The words pulled her back from the edge of darkness. Janelle forced her eyes to stay open, even though every cell in her body was begging to give up. She looked at Jerry's profile lit by flashes of lightning, at the determination written in every line of his face, and she understood that this man would die before he let her down. Police tried to stop them at a roadblock, officers shouting and waving for Jerry to halt, but he crashed through the barricade without slowing. Janelle heard sirens behind them, but Jerry didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept driving because every second mattered and nothing else did. The hospital finally appeared through the rain like a miracle, and Jerry slammed the truck into park outside the emergency doors. He ran around to Janelle's side and lifted her out, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered words she would remember forever. "Thank you for not leaving me. Thank you for being here when no one else was." Jerry's arms tightened around her as he carried her through the automatic doors, and Janelle felt safe despite the pain ripping through her body, felt protected despite being more vulnerable than she had ever been in her life. Chapter 5. 10 minutes from forever. Jerry burst through the emergency room doors, carrying Janelle like she was made of crystal, water dripping from both of them and pooling on polished floors. His voice cutting through the controlled chaos with desperate urgency. "I need help right now. She's in labor. Contractions are less than 2 minutes apart. Something's wrong. Please help us." Nurses rushed forward with a gurney, materializing as if summoned by the desperation in his voice, and Jerry lowered Janelle onto it as gently as he could despite his shaking hands. A doctor appeared beside them, young and sharp-eyed, firing questions at Jerry that he couldn't fully answer because he didn't know Janelle's complete medical history, didn't know what complications might exist, how far apart are the contractions. The doctor asked while nurses attached monitors and started an IV with practiced efficiency that spoke of years dealing with emergencies exactly like this. "Less than 2 minutes now," Jerry said, his hand still gripping Janelle's because letting go felt impossible. "They started coming fast from the beginning. We got stuck in the storm. I think something's really wrong." The doctor's expression shifted into something more serious as she examined the monitors, and Jerry saw her exchange a look with one of the nurses that made his blood run cold with fear he couldn't afford to show. "We need to get her to delivery right now. This baby is in serious distress." They started wheeling Janelle away, and a nurse put her hand on Jerry's chest to stop him from following, her voice professional but firm. "Sir, only family members are allowed in the delivery room. You'll need to wait here." Something inside Jerry broke. He looked at this nurse with eyes that had watched his entire family die, eyes that had spent countless days focused on revenge, eyes that now held only one purpose, which was keeping Janelle alive. His voice dropped to a tone that made the nurse physically step backward. "I am the only family this woman has. Her husband abandoned her while she was pregnant to go on vacation and blocked her phone number so she couldn't reach him when she went into labor. I drove through a storm that should have killed us both to get her here. I'm not leaving her side. If you try to stop me from being there when she needs me, I will make it my personal mission to tear apart every policy in this hospital until someone tells me no who actually has authority to do it." The nurse looked into Jerry's eyes and seemed to see something there that convinced her not to argue. She stepped aside with a small nod, and Jerry followed the gurney through double doors into a delivery room where bright lights and medical equipment created an atmosphere of controlled crisis. Janelle's hand found his immediately, gripping with strength that spoke of desperation and trust woven together. Her face was pale and slick with sweat, her eyes wide with pain and fear, and Jerry leaned close enough that only she could hear him when he spoke. "I'm here, Janelle. I'm not going anywhere. You're going to survive this. Your daughter is going to survive this. I promise you." The doctor was speaking rapidly to the nurses, medical terminology that Jerry didn't fully understand, but that painted a picture of serious danger. Words like fetal distress and umbilical cord compression and elevated blood pressure created a tapestry of risk that made Jerry's chest tight with fear. "Janelle, listen to me," the doctor said, her voice calm but urgent in that way medical professionals master when they need to deliver bad news without causing panic. "Your baby's heart rate is dropping dangerously low. The umbilical cord is compressed, which means she's not getting enough oxygen. We need to deliver her immediately. This is going to be intense and painful, but I need you to work with me. Can you do that?" Janelle nodded, tears streaming down her face, and Jerry squeezed her hand hard enough that she gasped. "Look at me," he commanded, and her eyes locked onto his. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You survived being abandoned by people who should have protected you. You survived a drive through hell to get here. You can survive this. Your daughter needs you to fight, Janelle. So fight with everything you have." What followed was the most intense experience of Jerry's life. He watched Janelle endure pain that seemed impossible for any human body to bear, watched her scream and cry and beg for it to be over, watched the monitors show a baby's heart rate dropping to levels that made medical staff exchange worried glances. He held her hand through all of it, whispered encouragement when she had breath to hear him, and prayed to whatever forces might be listening that this woman and her child would survive. The doctor's voice cut through everything else with sharp urgency. "One more push, Janelle. Give me everything you have left. One more push and your daughter will be here." Janelle screamed as she pushed, a sound of effort and pain and desperation that seemed to come from her very soul. And then, suddenly, there was a new sound that changed everything. A baby crying, tiny and furious and absolutely perfect, the most beautiful sound Jerry had ever heard in his entire life. "She's here," the doctor said, and Jerry could hear relief flooding her voice. "You did it, Janelle. Your daughter is here and she's breathing, and she's perfect." They placed the baby on Janelle's chest. This tiny, perfect human, still covered in evidence of birth, screaming her rage at being forced into a cold world after months of warmth. Janelle looked down at her daughter and started sobbing, her hands trembling as she touched the baby's face with infinite gentleness. "Hello, baby girl," Janelle whispered through tears that wouldn't stop falling. "I'm your mama. I love you so much. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby's cries quieted slightly, as if she recognized her mother's voice. And Janelle counted tiny fingers and toes and marveled at the miracle of this life she had created. Jerry stood beside the bed watching this moment, and tears streamed down his face without permission or control. He had not cried since finding his sister's body, had locked away every emotion that might slow his pursuit of revenge, had turned himself into something cold because feeling things hurt too much. But watching Janelle meet her daughter shattered every wall he had built around his heart. This was life in its purest form, hope and possibility, wrapped in a tiny human who had no idea she had almost died before her life truly began. The doctor was speaking, explaining something important, and Jerry forced himself to focus on her words through the fog of emotion. "If you had arrived 10 minutes later, we would have lost both of them. The baby wasn't getting enough oxygen, and Janelle's blood pressure had spiked to stroke-level danger. 10 more minutes, and this would have been a tragedy. You saved their lives by getting her here when you did." The words hit Jerry like a physical blow. 10 minutes! They had been 10 minutes away from losing everything. If he had driven slower, if he had stopped at that police roadblock, if he had taken any of the safer routes instead of pushing through flooded roads, Janelle and her baby would be dead right now. He looked at this woman who meant nothing to him by blood or obligation. This woman who had somehow become important despite his best efforts to remain detached. And he understood that something fundamental had shifted inside him. Revenge had been his only purpose for so long. But watching Janelle with her daughter made him remember that there were things worth living for beyond destroying the people who destroyed you. "Do you want to hold her?" Janelle asked, and Jerry realized she was talking to him. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was joy in them. Real joy that he had not seen in all the time he had known her. "I haven't held a baby in a very long time," Jerry said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. "I'm not sure I remember how." "It's easy," Janelle said softly, her smile gentle. "Just support her head and hold her close. Jerry, you saved both our lives tonight. You deserve to meet her properly. Please." The nurses helped transfer the baby from Janelle's arms to Jerry's, and he looked down at this tiny human who weighed almost nothing and meant everything. Her eyes were trying to focus on his face, her miniature fingers curling and uncurling, and Jerry felt grief and joy mixing together in his chest until he could barely breathe. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice breaking completely. "You have no idea how glad I am that you're here. You have the strongest, bravest mother in the entire world. I'm going to make sure you always know how much you're loved. I promise you that with everything I am." The baby made a small, questioning sound, and Jerry felt something inside his chest crack wide open. This was what his sister's child had looked like at this age, before everything fell apart and that baby became another casualty of Ashford cruelty. Holding Janelle's daughter reminded him of what he had lost, of the family he would never have, of the life that was stolen from him. But it also reminded him that new life was possible, that love could exist even after devastating loss, that maybe there was room in his carefully constructed revenge for something that looked like redemption, for building something beautiful alongside the destruction he had planned. Jerry stood there with tears streaming down his face, holding a baby who was not his, but who he would protect with his life. And he understood that everything had just changed. His revenge would still happen. The Ashford family would still pay for what they did, but now he had another purpose alongside the destruction. He would protect Janelle and her daughter, would make sure they survived what was coming, would give them the safety and care they deserved, even if it complicated every plan he had spent endless time constructing. Because in the end, revenge was just destroying something that was already broken. But protecting Janelle and Lily, that was building something new from ashes. That was choosing life over death. That was remembering how to be human again. Chapter 6. 15 days that changed everything. They stayed in the hospital while Janelle's body healed from the trauma of birth, and doctors monitored baby Lily to ensure no lasting damage from the oxygen deprivation she had suffered. Jerry never left except to bring Janelle real food because the hospital meals were inedible. And he slept in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed because when she woke from nightmares, she needed to see someone who cared. "You don't have to stay," Janelle said on the second night when she woke to find him still there, his body contorted in that chair in ways that had to be causing pain. "You must be exhausted, Jerry. Go home and sleep in a real bed." "I need to be here when you wake up," Jerry explained, his voice gentle but firm. "You have nightmares. I can see them on your face even when you're sleeping. When you wake up scared, you need to see someone who cares about you. Let me be that person." Janelle wanted to argue, but couldn't find words to fight against such simple kindness. She named her daughter Lily on the third day, after her grandmother who had raised her with love, despite having almost nothing else to give. And Jerry said it was perfect for a child who had fought so hard to be born. They were discharged on the fourth day, and Jerry drove them back to the Ashford estate in his truck. Janelle looked at the mansion, where she had been so miserable, and felt her stomach twist with dread at returning to that cold, empty space. Jerry seemed to sense her hesitation because he drove past the main house without slowing, pulling up instead to the small cottage where he had been living. "You're staying here," Jerry said, and it wasn't a question or a request. "I won't leave you alone in that house, Janelle. I've moved my things to one of the guest rooms in the main building. This cottage is yours and Lily's for as long as you need it." Janelle wanted to protest, wanted to say she couldn't take his home. But when she looked at the cottage with its warm lights glowing through windows, she found herself nodding. Jerry carried Lily inside while Janelle followed slowly, her body still healing from birth, and she discovered that he had transformed the space into something perfect. Fresh flowers filled every surface. The bedroom had been prepared with clean sheets and extra pillows for nursing. A bassinet stood ready beside the bed. The kitchen was stocked with food. Everything had been thought of, everything prepared. And Janelle stood in the middle of this care and cried because no one had ever taken care of her like this. The next days blurred together in exhaustion and endless feedings, and Jerry and Janelle developed a rhythm that felt like being a real family, even though they both knew it was temporary. He brought her breakfast every morning without fail. sat with her during long afternoons when postpartum hormones made her cry for reasons she couldn't articulate, took over with Lily during the nights so Janelle could sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. Janelle watched Jerry with her daughter and saw tenderness that transformed him completely. He changed diapers with fumbling determination that made her laugh until tears came. He learned to warm bottles to the exact temperature Lily preferred. He rocked the baby to sleep while singing lullabies in a voice Janelle discovered was beautiful. And she would lie in bed listening to him sing and feeling her heart rearrange itself in terrifying ways. She caught herself watching him when he thought she wasn't looking, noticed how his hands remained gentle with Lily despite being calloused from work, noticed how he talked to the baby about everything as if she could understand every word, noticed how he moved through the cottage like he belonged there, like they all belonged together, like this was a real family instead of a temporary arrangement born from crisis. And she noticed other things too, things that made her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled at something Lily did. The way his voice dropped into softer tones when he spoke to the baby in the middle of the night, thinking Janelle was asleep. The way he looked at Janelle sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention, with an expression that held tenderness and longing and something that looked almost like hope. She found herself thinking about him during quiet moments, remembering conversations they had shared, wondering what it would be like to be loved by someone like Jerry, who chose to care rather than being obligated to care. But these thoughts terrified her because falling for Jerry meant risking her heart again, meant trusting someone after Blake had shattered her ability to trust. What if Jerry's kindness was temporary? What if he changed once things became normal and boring? What if she was just confusing gratitude with love because he had saved her life? The questions circled through her mind during sleepless nights, warring with the growing certainty that what she felt for Jerry was deeper and more real than anything she had felt for Blake. One evening, Jerry was washing bottles at the sink, and Janelle brought Lily to him, the baby fussing in that way that meant she was tired but fighting sleep. "Can you try rocking her? She settles faster for you than she does for me." Jerry took Lily carefully, settling her against his chest, and started that gentle, swaying motion Janelle had watched him perfect. He hummed something low and soothing, and within minutes Lily's eyes were drooping closed in complete trust. "You're really good at this," Janelle said softly, watching the way he held her daughter with such natural care. "It's like you were meant to be a father." Jerry's expression shifted into something painful. "My sister had a son. I was there when he was born, helped take care of him during those first months. I thought I would get to watch him grow up, be the uncle who taught him things. But I lost him along with everyone else when my family fell apart." Janelle's heart ached for the grief in his voice. "Can you tell me what happened to your family? You've mentioned losing them before, but you've never explained how." For a long moment, Jerry was silent, just swaying gently with Lily in his arms, and Janelle thought he wouldn't answer. But then he started speaking, his voice low and controlled, but carrying the weight of pain that had never healed. "My family had something that bigger, more powerful people wanted. They didn't ask to buy it fairly. They just took it through lies and manipulation and using their wealth to corrupt everything that should have protected us. They destroyed us completely, turned our name into something people were ashamed to be associated with. My father's heart broke from the shock of losing everything he built. My mother gave up and died from grief. My sister tried to be strong, but the weight was too much and she took her own life. And I survived, if you can call it surviving." Tears streamed down Janelle's face as she listened. "Jerry, I'm so sorry. No one should have to carry that kind of loss. Who did this to your family?" Jerry looked at her then, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "The same family you married into, Janelle. The Ashfords destroyed my family, and I've spent a very long time planning to make them pay for what they did." The words hung in the air between them, and Janelle felt the world tilt as understanding crashed over her. "You've been planning revenge. That's why you're here. That's why you work as their groundskeeper. You've been hiding who you really are? Yes, Jerry said simply. I hid my identity to test them, to see if any of them had a heart worth saving. They all failed. Every single one of them treated me like I wasn't human. But then I met you, and you complicated everything because you're innocent in all of this. You're just another person they're destroying. And watching them hurt you made me remember what it felt like to care about protecting someone instead of just planning destruction. Janelle's mind was reeling, trying to process everything. So taking care of me, was that part of your revenge? Was I just a tool you used to hurt them? No, Jerry said with absolute conviction, and he took a step closer to her, careful not to wake Lily sleeping against his chest. You were never part of the plan. You became the part I didn't plan for, the part that made me remember I used to be someone who believed in building things instead of just tearing them down. Everything I did for you and Lily, I did because I care about you, not because it served my revenge. He paused, his eyes searching hers. These past days with you and Lily have been the happiest I've known in longer than I can remember. Watching you be a mother, hearing you laugh, seeing you smile again after months of them crushing your spirit. It's reminded me what it feels like to want to protect something, instead of just destroying the people who hurt you. You're making me human again, Janelle, and that terrifies me because caring about people means you can lose them. I don't know if I can survive that kind of loss again. Janelle felt her own fears reflected in his confession. They were both terrified of caring too much, both scarred by loss, both risking their hearts by letting this thing between them grow. She moved closer until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough to see Lily's tiny hand curled against his shirt, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Janelle wanted to be angry, wanted to feel betrayed by his deception, but when she looked at this man holding her daughter with such tenderness, she couldn't find rage anywhere inside her. What happens now? What are you planning to do to Blake and his family? Make them face consequences for their crimes, Jerry said. Make them understand what it feels like to lose everything. But more than that, make sure you and Lily are safe and cared for when it all comes crashing down. That's what matters most to me now. They stood close in the cottage kitchen, two people who had found each other through tragedy, and Janelle felt something shift between them. She was falling in love with Jerry, had been falling for days now, maybe longer. Not the desperate, needy love she had felt for Blake, but something deeper and more real, built on actions rather than words. The realization hit her with the force of truth that can no longer be denied. She loved him. Loved the way he hummed to Lily at 3 a.m, loved how he brought her breakfast without being asked, loved the gentleness in his hands and the pain in his eyes, and the way he was fighting so hard to be good despite the revenge burning in his chest. She loved him not because he had saved her life, though he had done that too, but because he had shown her what real love looked like through 1,000 small choices that added up to devotion. But loving him meant risking everything she had left to risk. It meant trusting again, after Blake had taught her that trust was foolish. It meant opening her heart when it had barely begun to heal from the last breaking. The fear was almost as powerful as the love, warring inside her chest until she felt like she might tear apart from the conflict. "I'm falling in love with you," Janelle heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. "And that terrifies me more than anything else that's happened, because I don't know if I can survive being hurt again. But I also can't pretend I don't feel it. Can't pretend that these past days haven't meant everything to me. Can't pretend you're just the man who saved my life when you become so much more than that." Jerry's eyes filled with tears and something that looked like wonder. "I'm falling in love with you too, Janelle. Have been falling since the first morning I brought you breakfast and saw you cry because someone finally cared whether you ate. I tried to fight it, tried to tell myself it was just protective instinct or guilt for planning to destroy your husband's family. But it's not that. It's you, the strength in you, the kindness you've maintained despite everything, the way you love Lily with your whole heart. You're making me want things I gave up wanting. making me believe in futures I stopped believing in. On the 15th morning after Lily's birth, Janelle woke to find Jerry sitting on the porch, staring at his phone, with an expression that made her stomach twist. Something was wrong. She could see it in every line of his body, in the tension of his shoulders, in the way his jaw was clenched. "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping outside with Lily in her arms. Jerry looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes that frightened her. "They're coming back, Blake and his family. They cut their vacation short. They'll be here this afternoon, and when they arrive, they're going to discover that everything they own is gone, and their world has collapsed. Are you ready for that?" Janelle looked at this man who had saved her life, who had cared for her daughter, who had been planning revenge while simultaneously falling in love with her. "I'm ready. Show me what justice looks like." Chapter 7. See you in court. The sound of multiple vehicles coming up the driveway made Janelle's heart pound against her ribs. She stood at the cottage window, watching the convoy of luxury cars pull up to the main house, watching Blake and his family emerge from their vehicles, looking tanned and irritated rather than relaxed. Blake looked thinner, his face drawn with stress that had nothing to do with missing his wife or newborn daughter he had never met. Constance emerged from her car already on her phone, her voice shrill even from this distance. Graham and Adriana looked around with confusion, turning rapidly to alarm as they tried their keys and discovered none of them worked. "What the hell?" Blake's voice carried across the lawn, sharp with confusion and rising anger. "Who changed the locks on my own house?" He tried the side door with the same result, then the back entrance, and Janelle could see panic starting to replace confusion on his face. Constance was screaming into her phone at someone, her composure cracking visibly. Graham was circling the property, trying every possible entry, like a trapped animal seeking escape. That's when Janelle saw it. A large notice posted prominently on the front gate, impossible to miss, printed on official paper that caught the afternoon light. She couldn't read it from the cottage, but she could see Blake tearing it down, could see his face going from purple to white as he read whatever was written there, could see him showing it to his mother, whose hand flew to her throat in shock. "See you in court," Janelle whispered. Somehow, knowing those words were on that notice, even though she couldn't see them, Blake was screaming now, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn. "This is illegal. They can't just seize our property. Call the lawyers, Mother! Call them right now!" But Constance was already on her phone, and from the way her face kept changing color, the lawyers were not telling her what she wanted to hear. Graham had his phone out too, checking something, and whatever he saw made him start cursing with creative fury. Adriana was crying, her perfect makeup running down her face in black streaks. Janelle watched it all unfold with strange detachment, as if she were watching a play, rather than witnessing the destruction of the family she had married into. She should have felt something, should have felt sympathy or satisfaction or fear, but instead she just felt numb. The front door of the mansion opened and Jerry emerged, and Janelle's breath caught because he looked nothing like the groundskeeper she had known. He moved with authority, with confidence, with the bearing of someone who owned everything he surveyed. Blake spun toward him with rage written across his face. "You! What did you do? What the hell did you do to my house?" Jerry's voice carried clearly across the lawn, calm and cold as winter ice. "Your house? That's interesting, Blake. According to the documents filed this morning, this property no longer belongs to you. It's being seized as part of the lawsuit against your family. You don't own this house anymore. You don't own anything anymore." Blake lunged at Jerry with his fists raised, but Jerry sidestepped easily, and Blake stumbled, catching himself against the wall. "You're just the groundskeeper. You can't do this. You don't have the authority." "That's where you're wrong," Jerry said, and there was something in his voice that made everyone freeze. "I'm not the groundskeeper. I never was. Let me tell you a story about a family you destroyed." Janelle moved closer to the window, Lily sleeping in her arms, as Jerry reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Even from this distance, she could see it was old, yellowed, and when Jerry held it up, she saw Blake's face transform into something that might have been recognition. "Does the name mean anything to you, Blake?" Jerry's voice cut through the afternoon air. "Or did your father destroy so many families that you can't keep track of all the lives he ruined?" "My name is Jerry Johnson. The family you're looking at in this photograph was mine. And when your father took everything we had built through fraud and lies, my family died. All of them." Constance made a sound like a wounded animal, her hand pressed against her chest. "That was so long ago. It was just the way things were done. Harrison said it was necessary for growth." "Necessary for growth," Jerry repeated, his voice sharp enough to cut. "That's what you call it when you forge documents to steal what doesn't belong to you? When you destroy people so completely they die from the grief. My father's heart broke when you took everything. My mother gave up and stopped living. My sister killed herself because her entire future disappeared overnight. 3 people dead because the Ashford family wanted something and didn't care who they crushed to get it." Graham was backing toward his car, but Jerry's next words stopped him. "Where are you going to go, Graham? Your accounts are frozen. Your credit cards are cancelled. Your assets are being seized. You have nowhere to run and no money to run with. This is illegal." Constance shrieked, her composure gone completely. "We have lawyers. We have connections. We'll fight this." Jerry's laugh was cold and humorless. "Fight it with what money? Your lawyers quit after seeing the evidence against you. Your connections are worthless now that everyone knows the Ashford name is about to become synonymous with criminal fraud. I've spent a very long time documenting every illegal thing your family has ever done. Every corrupt official you bought, every falsified document, every crime your father committed that you continued. Federal prosecutors are reviewing everything right now. Criminal charges are coming." Adriana collapsed to her knees, sobbing, and Blake looked at Jerry with hate so pure it seemed to radiate from him like heat. "This is about revenge. This is about you being bitter because your family couldn't compete." "No," Jerry said, his voice dropping to something that made even Janelle shiver from her position in the cottage. "This is about justice for people who died because of your family's greed. This is about making sure you pay for every life you destroyed. But there's one more thing I need to address, Blake. Something very personal between you and me." Jerry pulled out another folder, thick with documents, and threw it at Blake's feet. "Divorce papers. Filed on behalf of your wife, who you abandoned while she was carrying your child. Abandonment, emotional abuse, reckless endangerment of a pregnant woman and her unborn baby. I have hospital records from the night Lily was born, showing how close both mother and child came to dying. I have police reports. I have doctor testimony. I have everything I need to make sure you never see your daughter again." Blake's face went from purple to white to something beyond color. "Where is Janelle? Where is my daughter?" "Your daughter?" Jerry's voice was deadly quiet. "You mean the daughter you've never met? The daughter whose birth you missed because you were on a yacht, laughing with your family while your wife was dying. You blocked her phone number, Blake. You erased her from your life while she was pregnant. You have no daughter. Not anymore. Those papers include a petition for full custody. Janelle will raise Lily alone, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison, wondering what your child looks like." Constance found her voice, though it came out as a desperate screech. "You can't do this. We're the Ashford family. We have power." Jerry smiled, and the expression was cold enough to freeze fire. "You were the Ashford family. Past tense. Because by the time I'm done, that name will be poison. Every news outlet in the country will run stories about your crimes. Every person you hurt will feel vindicated. And every morning you wake up in a prison cell, you'll remember the family you destroyed, who came back to destroy you." Blake made one final desperate lunge at Jerry, but Jerry caught his arm and twisted, putting Blake on his knees with a move so fast Janelle barely saw it happen. Jerry leaned down and said something directly into Blake's ear that Janelle couldn't hear, something that made Blake's face go slack with horror. Then Jerry released him and walked away, leaving the Ashford family in ruins on their front lawn. Police cars were pulling up now, officers emerging to arrest people whose crimes had finally caught up with them. Jerry walked directly toward the cottage, and Janelle backed away from the window with her heart pounding. The door opened, and Jerry stood there. And Janelle looked at this man she thought she knew, and realized she was only beginning to understand who he really was. "Who are you?" she whispered, clutching Lily tighter. "I'm someone who spent a very long time becoming wealthy enough to destroy the people who killed my family," Jerry said, his voice tired but honest. "I'm someone who came here planning revenge and nothing else. And I'm someone who fell in love with you and your daughter, despite every intention not to care about anyone ever again." The confession hung in the air between them. Janelle felt tears start to fall because she didn't know how to process everything, didn't know how to reconcile the gentle man who sang lullabies with the person who had just destroyed an entire family with calculated precision. "You lied to me about everything," Janelle said, her voice breaking. "I lied about who I was," Jerry admitted, "but I never lied about how I felt. Everything I did for you and Lily, I did because I care about you, not because it served my revenge. You became the part of my life that reminded me I used to be someone who believed in protecting people instead of just destroying their enemies." Janelle looked at him, standing in the doorway of the cottage that had become their temporary home. Looked at this man who had saved her life and cared for her daughter and destroyed her husband's family, all for reasons that were both revenge and something deeper. "What happens now?" "Now I take you somewhere safe," Jerry said. "Somewhere far away from the Ashford family and everything they represent. And then I tell you the whole truth about everything, about who I really am, about what I own, about why I hid my identity, to test whether anyone in that family had a heart worth saving. They all failed, Janelle, every single one of them. But you showed me that goodness still exists even in houses built on cruelty." Janelle looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms. This daughter who would never know the family that rejected her, and she made a decision. "Okay, take us somewhere safe. And then you owe me every truth you've been hiding. No more secrets, Jerry. If we're going to move forward from here, I need complete honesty." Jerry nodded, relief visible on his face. "Everything, I promise. Let me get your things." Within the hour, they were in Jerry's truck driving away from the Ashford estate, leaving behind the family that was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what had hit them. Janelle looked back once and saw police officers approaching Blake and his family, saw the beginning of an ending that had been building for longer than she had known. Chapter 8. The House That Truth Built. They drove toward the coast, where the smell of salt water grew stronger with each mile, and Lily slept in her car seat, oblivious to the world-changing events happening around her. Janelle stared out the window, watching landscape transform from suburbs to countryside to coastline, and Jerry remained silent beside her. His hands gripping the wheel with tension he was fighting to control. Whatever he was about to show her, whatever truth he was about to reveal, was difficult for him in ways she didn't fully understand yet. Janelle felt her own tension building because everything she thought she knew about Jerry Johnson was about to be rewritten, and she didn't know if she was ready for that transformation. The ocean appeared on the horizon, vast and endless, and Jerry turned down a private road that led toward cliffs overlooking water. At the end of that road stood a house that took Janelle's breath away. It was massive, but not ostentatious, built with clean modern lines and enormous windows that faced the ocean. White stone and glass and natural wood combined into something that looked both substantial and ethereal. Jerry pulled into the circular driveway and turned off the engine, but he didn't get out immediately. He sat there staring at the house with an expression Janelle couldn't read. "I built this," Jerry finally said, his voice quiet. "Spent a fortune on it. Hired the best people to make sure every detail was perfect. But I've never lived here, never even stayed one night, because building a house this beautiful when you're completely alone felt like torture." Janelle looked at the house, at the way it seemed to grow from the cliffs naturally. "Why are you showing me this? Why bring me here?" Jerry turned to look at her, and his eyes held vulnerability she had never seen before. Because you asked how a servant could own something like this. Because you deserve to know the truth about who I really am. And because I want you and Lily to stay here, to be safe here, while everything with the Ashford family plays out. He got out and came around to help her with Lily, and Janelle followed him toward the massive front door. Jerry entered a code, and the door swung open silently, revealing an interior that made Janelle's breath catch. The entire back wall was glass overlooking the ocean, and the view was so spectacular it made her feel suspended between earth and sky. The furniture was minimal but beautiful, everything in shades of white and cream and natural wood. Artwork hung on walls, pieces Janelle recognized as expensive, even though she knew nothing about art. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, with gleaming appliances and marble countertops. Everything spoke of wealth so profound it made the Ashford mansion look cheap by comparison. "Jerry," Janelle whispered, turning to face him with Lily in her arms. "Who are you really? How does a groundskeeper own a house like this?" Jerry set down their bags and moved to stand in front of the windows, his back to her, his shoulders tense. "I'm not a groundskeeper. I never was. My name is Jerry Johnson, and I'm the sole heir to everything my family built before it was stolen. But more than that, I'm someone who spent a long time after my family died making more money than the Ashfords could imagine. I own properties around the world. I have wealth that generates income while I sleep. I'm far wealthier than Blake's entire family combined." The words hung in the air, and Janelle felt the room tilt as understanding crashed over her. "You've been pretending to be poor, living in that cottage, doing manual labor. All of it was a disguise." "Yes," Jerry said, finally turning to face her. "I needed to be close to the Ashford family, to document their crimes and plan my revenge. The best way to do that was from a position where they didn't see me as a threat, where they forgot I was even human. So I became their groundskeeper, and I played that role for a long time. But I also did something else. I hid my identity to test them, to see if any of them had a heart worth saving. I wanted to know if they would show kindness to someone they perceived as beneath them. They all failed, Janelle, every single one. But you were different. You saw me as human even when you thought I was just the help." Janelle felt tears streaming down her face. "And me? Was I part of your test? Was taking care of me just another way to hurt them?" "No," Jerry said, and he moved toward her with intensity that made her take a step back. "You were never part of the plan. You were the complication I didn't anticipate. When Blake brought you home, I thought you were just another Ashford, just another person drunk on wealth. But then I watched as they treated you like garbage, watched as you tried so hard to earn love from people incapable of giving it. And I started to care about you despite every intention not to feel anything for anyone ever again." He stopped a few feet away from her, giving her space. "Everything I did for you and Lily, I did because I care about you. The breakfast trays and the nursery, and driving through that storm and taking care of you both, none of that was manipulation. That was me remembering what it felt like to want to protect someone instead of just destroying their enemies. You made me remember I used to be someone who believed in building things instead of just tearing them down." Janelle looked at this man who had lied about everything except his feelings. This man who had saved her life and cared for her daughter and destroyed her husband's family, all for reasons that were both revenge and redemption woven together. "I don't know how to feel about this. Part of me is angry you lied. Part of me is grateful you protected us. Part of me is terrified of how much I care about you despite everything." "Then let me show you what's real," Jerry said. "Stay here. Let me take care of you and Lily while the legal proceedings against the Ashford family play out. Let me prove through actions that what I feel for you is genuine. And when it's all over, when Blake and his family are paying for their crimes, you can decide whether you want anything to do with me or whether you want me to disappear from your life forever." Janelle looked around the ocean house, at the space that spoke of loneliness transformed into hope. She looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms. And she looked at Jerry standing there with his heart in his eyes, offering her safety and care and love if she was brave enough to accept it. "Okay," she finally said. "We'll stay, but you owe me the whole story. Every detail about your family and what the Ashfords did to them. Every step of your revenge. Everything. No more secrets." Relief flooded Jerry's face. "Everything. I promise." He led her through the house to a bedroom that faced the ocean, enormous and beautiful with its own sitting area. A crib had already been set up by the windows, and Janelle realized Jerry must have prepared this room, knowing she would come, hoping she would agree to stay. She settled Lily in the crib, and the baby barely stirred, exhausted from the day. Janelle stood there watching her daughter sleep, thinking about how this child would grow up, never knowing the family that rejected her. Jerry stood in the doorway waiting, and Janelle took a breath before turning to face him. "Tell me everything. Starting from the beginning. I want the whole truth," so Jerry told her. They sat in the living room overlooking the ocean while the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, and Jerry told her everything. About his family and what the Ashfords had done, about watching his father and mother and sister die one by one, about spending time rebuilding himself and creating wealth, about hiding his identity to test whether anyone in the Ashford family had a heart worth saving, and he told her about falling in love with her despite every intention to remain detached, about driving through that storm and realizing revenge meant nothing if she and Lily died, about holding Lily for the first time and feeling something crack open inside his chest. Janelle listened to all of it. And by the time Jerry finished, full darkness had fallen, and the ocean was just sound beyond the windows. She sat there processing everything he had told her, trying to reconcile the man who had cared for her so tenderly with the man who had destroyed an entire family with calculated precision. "What happens now?" she finally asked. Jerry leaned forward. "The criminal case against the Ashford family will take time to fully resolve, but they'll be arrested soon. The evidence is overwhelming. They'll all go to prison. The divorce will be finalized quickly, given the abandonment and endangerment charges. You'll get full custody of Lily, but more than that, you'll be free. Free from Blake and free from his family, and free to build whatever life you want." "And what about you?" Janelle asked. "Where do you fit in that life I'm building?" Jerry looked at her with hope and fear mixed together. "That's entirely up to you, Janelle. I want to be part of your life. Want to watch Lily grow up. Want to be there for all the moments. But I understand if you can't forgive the deception. I'll make sure you're safe and financially secure, and then I'll step back if that's what you need." Janelle stood and moved to the windows, looking out at darkness broken only by moonlight on water. She thought about Blake and his broken promises. She thought about Jerry and how his actions had proven his care, even when his words had been lies. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Janelle said honestly. "But I don't want you to disappear. I want you here while I figure out how I feel. Can you give me that? Time without pressure? However much time you need," Jerry said immediately. "I'll be here, proving through actions that what I feel is real." Janelle nodded, still looking out at the ocean. "Okay then. One day at a time." Chapter 9. The Courtroom of Consequences. The next weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings that moved with surprising speed given how overwhelming the evidence was. Janelle stayed at the Ocean House with Lily, watching from a safe distance as the Ashford family's empire crumbled in headlines and news segments. The arrests happened first. Blake, Constance, Graham and Adriana were all taken into custody on charges that painted them as exactly what they were. People who had built their fortune on the broken backs of families like Jerry's. The media descended on the story with hunger, and every outlet ran pieces about their spectacular fall. Janelle had to give depositions about Blake's abandonment, about the night Lily was born, about months of emotional abuse. It was painful revisiting those memories, speaking them out loud to lawyers and court reporters, but it was also cathartic. Each word she spoke felt like another chain breaking. Through all of this, Jerry kept his promise. He took care of Janelle and Lily without expectations. He brought her breakfast every morning, rocked Lily to sleep when she was fussy, sat with Janelle during long evenings when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. He was present without being pushy, caring without being controlling. Slowly, Janelle began to understand that this was who Jerry really was beneath the revenge and the disguise. This gentle, caring man who had been buried under grief for so long he had forgotten he existed. Taking care of her and Lily was bringing him back to life, reminding him that he was more than just a weapon aimed at people who destroyed his family. The trial moved forward with speed unusual for such complex cases. But the evidence was so overwhelming that the Ashford family's lawyers advised them to plead guilty in exchange for reduced sentences. Janelle decided to attend the sentencing hearing. She needed to see this through, needed to watch this chapter close before she could fully move forward. Jerry drove her to the courthouse with Lily in her car seat, and they walked inside together. The courtroom was packed with people the Ashford family had hurt over the years, all of them there to witness justice finally being served. Janelle sat in the gallery with Lily in her arms and Jerry beside her, and she waited for the judge to deliver verdicts that would change everything. Blake was brought in, wearing an orange jumpsuit that stripped away the last vestiges of his arrogance. He looked older, diminished, like someone who had finally realized that wealth couldn't protect him from consequences. Constance, Graham, and Adriana followed, all of them wearing the same orange, all of them looking defeated in ways Janelle had never seen. The judge read the charges, a litany of crimes that took minutes to fully enumerate. Then came the sentences. Blake, prison time that would take the best years of his life. Constance, even longer for her role in orchestrating many of the family's criminal activities. Graham and Adriana, substantial sentences that would ensure they understood actions had consequences. As the judge read each sentence, Janelle watched Blake's face crumble. He looked older somehow, stripped of everything that had made him feel powerful. When the judge finished, Blake turned and looked directly at Janelle across the courtroom. She expected to see anger or hate, but instead she saw something that looked almost like regret. Their eyes met and held for a long moment, and Janelle felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no grief for what they had once been. Just emptiness where her feelings for him used to live. She had loved him once, or thought she had, but that love had died so slowly, she hadn't even noticed it was gone until she stood in a courtroom watching him be sentenced to prison. A court official approached Janelle with divorce papers. She stood, Lily in one arm, and signed them with her free hand. Each signature felt like shedding a skin that had never fit properly. The official took the papers, and that was it. Her marriage was over, ended not with drama, but with simple signatures on legal documents. Police started moving forward to take the Ashford family away to begin their sentences, and that's when Jerry stood. Janelle looked at him with confusion, wondering what he was doing, and then she understood. Jerry moved toward the center of the courtroom where everyone could see him. Blake and his family were being led past in handcuffs, and Jerry positioned himself directly in their path. Then, in front of the entire courtroom full of people, Jerry Johnson dropped to one knee. The room went completely silent. Everyone froze, including the officers escorting the Ashford family, because what was happening was so unexpected that no one knew how to respond. Jerry reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring simple and beautiful, designed for someone who valued meaning over ostentation. He looked up at Janelle, standing there with their daughter in her arms. And when he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom. Janelle, I know this isn't the romantic proposal you probably imagined. I know the timing is strange, and we're surrounded by people, and your ex-husband is standing right there in handcuffs, watching this happen. But I need him to see this. I need him to understand what he threw away. I need him to know that the woman he treated like garbage is the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Jerry's voice grew stronger. You survived being abandoned by people who should have protected you. You survived almost dying to bring your daughter into this world. You survived months of cruelty that would have broken most people. And through all of that, you never lost your kindness. never lost your ability to see other people as human beings worthy of care. You taught me how to be human again, after I spent so long being nothing but anger and revenge." Tears were streaming down Janelle's face now, and she could hear other people in the courtroom crying too. Jerry continued, still on one knee, still holding out that ring. "I'm not asking you to marry me today, or tomorrow, or even next year. I'm asking if you'll let me spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you and Lily deserve. Will you let me love you the way you always deserved to be loved? Will you let me be Lily's father in every way that matters? Will you build a life with me, not because I saved you, but because we saved each other?" The courtroom was so silent, Janelle could hear her own heartbeat. She looked at Jerry kneeling there, with his heart exposed for everyone to see. She looked at Blake, standing in handcuffs, watching the woman he had discarded being loved the way he had never managed to love her. She looked down at Lily in her arms, this daughter who had given her purpose when everything else was falling apart. And she understood that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. Love was about choosing someone every single day, about showing up when it was hard, about caring for someone not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Jerry had done that, had proven through countless small actions that he meant every word he was saying. "Yes," Janelle said, her voice clear despite the tears. "Yes, I'll let you love me. Yes, I'll build a life with you. Yes to all of it." Jerry stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he wrapped his arms around her and Lily, holding them both like they were the most precious things in the world. The courtroom erupted in applause, people standing and cheering for this moment of hope and new beginnings happening in a space usually reserved for endings and consequences. Blake was led away, and Janelle saw him look back once at what he had lost, not with anger, but with something that might have been understanding, finally realizing that he had thrown away something irreplaceable. The rest of the Ashford family followed, and Janelle watched them disappear, knowing she would never see any of them again. She looked down at the ring on her finger, at the 3 stones Jerry had told her represented the 3 of them, a family they were choosing to build. She looked up at Jerry holding Lily with such tenderness, and she felt peace settling into her bones. This was not the fairy tale ending she had imagined when she married Blake. But it was real, built on honesty and care, and choosing each other despite everything that had tried to break them. And that made it better than any fairy tale. Chapter 10. The Forever Promise. The weeks after the sentencing passed in gentle rhythm, as Janelle and Jerry learned to be a family without crisis, driving them together. They woke with Lily's demands for breakfast, spent afternoons walking the cliffs overlooking endless ocean, spent evenings watching their daughter discover her own fingers, with the fascination of someone encountering magic. Janelle wore the ring Jerry had given her, but they had not set a wedding date, both of them understanding that building something real required time and patience. Jerry proved every day through small actions that his love was genuine, and Janelle felt her fear slowly transforming into trust. One morning, Janelle woke to find official documents on the kitchen counter. The final divorce decree, stamped and sealed, turning her from Mrs. Blake Ashford into simply Janelle again. She signed her maiden name with satisfaction that felt like reclaiming something stolen, like becoming herself again after years of wearing someone else's identity. The settlement was substantial, more money than she had imagined, enough to ensure Lily would never want for anything. But Janelle had learned that money meant nothing without care, that living in luxury felt like prison when the people there treated you like garbage. She set most of it aside for Lily's future, for opportunities she herself had never had. Jerry found her sitting on the porch overlooking the ocean, and he settled beside her with Lily in his arms. The baby was getting bigger, more alert, tracking faces and sounds with growing awareness. When Jerry sang to her now, Lily would coo back as if trying to join the melody. "The divorce is final," Janelle said, showing him the documents. It's really over. Jerry looked at the papers and then at her. How do you feel? Free, Janelle said honestly. Lighter than I've felt in so long. Like I can finally breathe without weight crushing my chest. Is that wrong? Should I feel sad? You feel however you feel, Jerry said gently. There's no right or wrong way to process the end of something that hurt you. Freedom is a perfectly reasonable emotion. They sat in comfortable silence, watching waves crash against cliffs, and Janelle thought about how far she had come from the broken woman crying alone in the Ashford mansion. She had survived things that should have destroyed her, and somehow she had come through stronger. I want to talk about the future, Janelle said, turning to face Jerry. About what we're building here. About what happens next. Jerry shifted Lily in his arms, giving Janelle his full attention. What do you want to happen? I want to marry you, Janelle said, and Jerry's eyes widened with surprise and hope. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I want Lily to grow up with parents who chose each other, who built something real together. I want to wake up every morning knowing that the man beside me values me, sees me, cares about me in ways that go beyond words. You've proven that to me every single day, Jerry. You've shown me what real love looks like. Jerry's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? We can wait as long as you need. I'm sure, Janelle said with conviction. The ring you gave me had 3 stones, 1 for each of us. But I think we need to add more stones as time goes on. 1 for each moment we choose each other. 1 for each day we build this family. Not because we're running from the past, but because we're running toward a future we're creating together. Jerry leaned over and kissed her forehead, careful not to disturb Lily sleeping in his arms. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I promise you that. I know you will, Janelle said, covering his hand with hers. Because that's who you are. The man who drove through a storm to save us. The man who cries when Lily smiles. The man who destroyed an entire family to protect the one he was building. You showed me that actions matter more than words, that love is built in small moments rather than grand gestures. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, 3 people who had found each other through tragedy and chosen to build something beautiful from ashes. Lily woke and demanded attention, and Jerry handled her with practiced ease while Janelle went inside to prepare a bottle. When she returned, she found Jerry standing at the edge of the cliff holding Lily, showing her the ocean stretching toward infinity. He was talking to the baby about waves and tides and the way water could be both gentle and powerful, and Janelle stood there watching them, knowing this was what family looked like. Tell me about your sister, Janelle said, joining them at the cliff's edge. Tell me about Marianne and what she loved. I want Lily to know about the family who came before her, about the people whose memory you carry. Jerry looked at her with gratitude written across his face. She would have loved you. Would have loved Lily. She believed that roses proved something beautiful could exist, even with thorns to protect it. That softness and strength were partners rather than opposites. She was wrong about a lot of things, but she was right about that. He pointed toward the house where roses were beginning to bloom in the garden he had planted. I'm going to teach Lily about roses, about how her great-aunt believed they represented hope and beauty, surviving in a world that could be cruel. And I'm going to teach her about her mother, about the strongest woman I've ever known, who survived impossible things and came through still believing in goodness. Janelle felt tears on her cheeks. And we'll teach her about her father, about the man who saved her life before she was even born, who chose to be her dad when he didn't have to, who proved that family is built through choice rather than just biology. They stood together at the cliff's edge, a family that had been forged in fire and emerged stronger. The ocean stretched before them full of possibility, and Janelle felt hope rising in her chest like the sun rising over water. Behind them lay the ashes of the Ashford Empire, justice served and debts paid. Before them stretched an ocean of possibility, horizons they would explore together. And between them grew love that neither had planned but both desperately needed, built not on the ruins of revenge, but on the foundation of choosing each other every single day. This was not the ending of his revenge story. This was the beginning of their love story. The best chapters were just starting to unfold, with every sunrise over the water and every smile from the daughter they were raising together. Jerry had destroyed a family to avenge his own, but in the process, he had built a new family from hope and choice and the courage to love again after devastating loss. "They say revenge is a dish best served cold," Jerry said softly, still holding Lily, "but love is a choice made warm. I spent so long focused on destroying what was broken that I forgot about building what could be beautiful. Thank you for reminding me, Janelle. Thank you for saving me while I was busy saving you." Janelle took his free hand and squeezed it. "We saved each other. That's what family does." They walked back toward the house together, ready to build their future one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time. The ocean sang behind them, waves crashing in endless rhythm, and Lily cooed in Jerry's arms as if she understood that she was exactly where she belonged. Held by parents who had chosen each other and chosen her and chosen to believe that love was stronger than revenge. They say the cruelest prisons wear masks of gold, but the strongest foundations are built from truth and time. Behind them lay wreckage of an empire built on broken backs, justice served, and old debts finally paid. Before them stretched an ocean of possibility, horizons they would explore as the family they chose to become. And between them grew love that neither planned but both desperately needed. Love that proved revenge could destroy what was broken while simultaneously building what was beautiful. This was not the ending of a revenge story. This was the beginning of their love story, and the most extraordinary chapters were just starting to unfold.